Hey class, this is Mr. Clark, and excuse me, these are the video notes for History 20, Chapter 3.1, Ancient India. Next slide. India's Neolithic period began approximately 9,000 years ago. Next slide. India's first civilization, the Harappan civilization, which existed between 2600 and 1700 BCE, emerged from it in the northwestern region of the subcontinent. And here are some ruins from that civilization. Next slide. Around 1750 BCE, as the Harappan civilization declined, Indo-Aryans migrated from Central Asia into northern India, ushering in the Vedic Age. And here's a map that shows the path of that migration. Next slide. The Vedic Age lasted for more than 1,000 years, between 1700 and 600 BCE. The Indo-Aryans brought with them their Vedic religion, Sanskrit language, and pastoral and farming way of life. Next slide. As they settled down on the Indo-Gangetic plain, and interacted with indigenous peoples, new political, social, and religious institutions formed. Next slide. Over the course of several centuries, Aryan clan and tribal organization developed into kingdoms and oligarchies. Next slide. A simpler society composed of priests, warriors, and commoners evolved into a more complex society organized by Varnas, the hereditary system of 4 hereditary social classes. And this chart here shows you those 4 social classes. Next slide. Finally, the Vedic religion of the Brahmin priests evolved into Brahmanism, the earliest stage in the development of Hinduism. Next slide. In the 500s BCE, India entered a transitional period which lasted until about 321 BCE. Next slide. 16 major kingdoms and oligarchies with roots in the late Vedic ages fought for control over territory in northern India. The kingdom of Magadha dominated. Next slide. Accompanying this time of warring states, India entered into a second stage of urbanization as towns and cities became a prominent feature of the north. Next slide. Alongside the Varnas, the caste system began to form, organizing Indian society into a much larger number of social groups based on occupation, residence, language, and religious beliefs. Next slide. New religious ideas were put forward by the Buddha, who lived between circa 563 and 480 BCE, to challenge the dominance of Brahmanism, and Buddhist monastic communities began to form. And that's it for chapter 3.1.